Long, long time, the third episode of HBO's The Last of Us is the best hour of standalone television produced in my lifetime. Now, I'm not a TV critic, so I'm going to share my experience as a middle aged gay man who's a fan of the games, a fan of the show, and I even made a recipe video for Halloween where I dressed up like Joel.
Let's spend time with Marco, but he's dressed up like Joel, so it's probably worth scaring.
Growing up, it was obvious that I'm gay. I think we all knew when I stayed inside to play Electronic Dream Phone with my sisters instead of going outside to play soccer. But my mom was both extremely religious and extremely homophobic. She told me not to move to Toronto for university since Toronto would make me a gay. It was the headquarters for the whores and the gays, according to her. I came out to her unintentionally while I was driving us home from IKEA. It was Pride Month and the radio was talking about gay people. And after her rants, I asked her why she was so hateful towards gay people. Would you kiss a boy? She asked me. She then quizzed me on if I had ever given a blowjob or if I had ever had sex in the butt. And I avoided her questions, and I avoided driving into the median, and I avoided letting her hate into my heart. She never accepted that I'm gay. Even in hospice care, even after I took her to every chemo appointment for 2 years, her last words to me were still, I need you to improve and be a better person, and you know what I mean. And it wasn't the first time she said it, but it was the last. While hurtful and cruel, her reaction didn't define my relationship with myself. I'm very proud of being a gay man, but being gay has never been a struggle for me, the way that being straight isn't a struggle for heterosexual people. I'm gay, but I'm also a cook and a writer. I'm a former CEO. I'm a gamer. I've tried to live a really interesting life where being gay is often the last bullet point in the summary of who I am. And I'm a boring, single, middle aged gay man who believes in monogamy. I don't enjoy being sexualized or objectified by strangers, and this often means that I don't participate in the gay community. This means that I don't post selfies on Instagram because of the inevitable messages that I get. Because these gays don't care about me, my life, or my food. They care about Marco the sexual object. And this isn't unique to gay men, this is the experience all women live every day. I grew up in a strange transition period for gay rights. Same sex marriage was actually made law in Ontario, where I live, in June 2003. So this is a few months before Outbreak Day in HBO's The Last of Us, though in the game, Outbreak Day is 10 years later in 2013. Same sex marriage was made legal across Canada in 2005, which is just after my first year of university. And growing up, my oldest sister had a lot of gay friends, so being gay has always been normal to me. Queer as Folk and Will and Grace were on TV. My world is a very different world than the one Bill and Frank would have grown up in. If Bill and Frank were 40 in 2003, their 20s would have been during the AIDS crisis of the 80s. And they've already seen all of their friends die once, which is why 80s means trouble. Frank landing in Bill's trap after traveling in a group of 10, the only one left alive, is both a tragic metaphor for the AIDS crisis and just a terrible cruelty for the character to have to live through that experience twice. Being gay, like any other label, is about negotiating what society wants to force upon you against who you want to be. And society loves to tell me who I should be, how I should act, how I should dress, where I should love, and who I should love, but I just want to be me. This means that gay men are stereotyped into these understandable buckets of gays to create an understanding of something people just don't want to understand, that love is love. There's this snap to grid gay man you're allowed to be. And gay men enforce these classifications on themselves, much like feminist stereotypes created by the patriarchy force other communities to divide themselves instead of coming together to be who they are. In media, this means gay men are allowed to be thin and flamboyant, hypersexualized fit men, or non-sexualized bears. They're usually helpful and designy. They hold up their arms like a T-Rex, and their stories are often about how they and everyone else are in a relationship with their sexuality. In a long, long time, Bill is played by Nick Offerman, who is straight but is married to Megan Mullally, who was on Will and Grace. And Frank is played by Murray Bartlett, who is gay in real life. They have a beautiful, long relationship. And their story is not driven by their relationship with their sexualities. Their story is driven by their relationship with the outbreak. The story opens with Bill's life as a prepper, Frank's arrival in Bill's trap, Bill and Frank falling in love and finding a reason to live that's more than just staying alive. They fight off the worst of humanity not because they're gay, but because society collapsed. And they lose to an impossible autoimmune condition that has no treatment, but notably that's not HIV, it might be MS or ALS. And they have dinner, and they have wine, and they have strawberries. Paying attention to things, it's how we show love. Bill survived Outbreak Day the way he lived his romantic life, with impenetrable walls to keep himself alone. His life is simple, but without meaning, and also without fear. And Bill isn't coded through gay stereotypes. He's well groomed, but he's conservative. He's gruff, but he has a wine collection. He turns on the natural gas supply so he can cook. And I think about what it would mean to live off grid at the end of the world, and I would probably put solar panels and batteries in my house for my induction stove, and I would probably go to Home Depot too. When Frank appears, there's this beautiful set of interactions that will be familiar to most gay men. I had one this week when I went to go buy a baguette. There's a smile that's a bit too wide and it reaches the eyes, with lingering eye contact, but then quickly looking away. There's these questions gay men ask themselves in daily life to keep themselves safe that they've made very visible through a post apocalyptic landscape. Are you like me, or will you hurt me? Another glance and another smile that reaches the eyes is usually a confirmation. I see you, and I'm not good at lying. And yet, my own walls remain as tall as Bill's, but my apocalypse is created in my own mind. Gay communities are not distributed like heterosexual communities. Often, gay men will move to the larger cities for safety and community, like a quarantine zone, but without the threat of zombies. Instead, gay communities are keeping out the physical, mental, and emotional monsters of homophobia. Kitchener-Waterloo, where I live, is the 10th largest city in Canada on paper, but it ends up with a smaller than expected amount of gays. Most of them move to Toronto, just like Frank was trying to find the Boston QZ. The safety of migration becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In Kitchener, we don't have a single gay bar, let alone an entire neighborhood. I've been single now for 4 years, as many as Bill before he meets Frank. And our very real pandemic has made dating very difficult. Initially for the obvious reasons, but now that society is piecing itself back together, the single gay men who are interested in monogamy are withdrawn. Everyone's too afraid to get attached, afraid that it's going to be taken away at any moment. And whether that trauma is from lockdowns or past relationships or that feeling of never being enough due to the cruelty of homophobic parenting is up for debate. It's probably a mix of all three. And for a while, my therapist helped me through these questions for myself, and recently her questions have changed. Instead of asking about me, she asks about the guys I date, like, what's his relationship with his father like? And she's taking notes for our next chat. Hi. That's not you. This is you. Frank finds a Linda Ronstadt piano book, and for people my age, this would be like finding Madonna, Lady Gaga, or Dua Lipa piano book mixed in with Beethoven. There's a gay rights icon, a pop culture queen, right in here with classical music. And with Craig Mazin's goals in line for the song he wanted, my modern take would be Hang With Me by Robin, which is so sad. And Frank then plays Long Long Time comically poorly to egg Bill on to showing what he's got. And the song is intensely lonely, but in this context, it's also beautiful and hopeful. Bill, for lack of a better word, comes out to Frank after tenderly playing Long Long Time on the piano. There was no girl. Another confirmation of what's been unsaid between them. And you can see all of Bill's walls come down in that one moment. When you've been single for a long time, there's this crushing despair mixed with the hope for a new relationship that only hits you once you're all in. It's really difficult to accept that you have to feel again. And both actors create this beautiful view into the wonderful and terrible things that love is going to make you do, which is what The Last of Us is all about. By removing society from the story, literally, all of the preconceived notions of what it means to be gay are gone. There is no one else. The only two people left in this world, or at least in Bill's town, are gay. They don't need to be othered because there's no one to other them from. Then love me the way that I want to be loved. Which brings us to crying. This episode upset me deeply, and a large part of that is because of the beautiful storytelling and the tragically romantic ending. In the official podcast, Mason explains one of the lines Bill says. This isn't the tragic suicide at the end of the play, referencing Mark Crowley's play The Boys in the Band. Mason says there's a tradition of essentially equating homosexuality with tragedy, and that a gay man couldn't possibly just age and be happy and live long. And that was important for me to have Bill literally say, that's not what this is. This episode hits me so hard because it shows a future that I never imagined for myself, that I never allowed myself to imagine. Even though their lives end in tragic suicide, Bill and Frank lived a beautiful life together with romance at the end of the world. They get 17 years in a world where there wasn't a guarantee you would even have a tomorrow. I hope that everyone can have that kind of experience in their lifetime, and I hope I get to have that kind of love too. Don't get me wrong, I have a full life with great friendships, but it would be really nice to have my person. And I sometimes wonder if it's easier, like Bill before Frank, to accept that will never happen for me. But if two gay men can find each other in the apocalypse, surely I can find someone in Kitchener. For those who have played the game, it has a much darker take on their relationship. Bill is just as paranoid, but when you meet him, he is alone. You learn later that Frank has left Bill. Bill is too rigid, he's too set in his ways. And you get a glimpse of this in the fight in the show when Frank wants to paint. In order to leave Bill, Frank sets out to get a car battery. He gets bitten by the infected, he hangs himself rather than lose himself to illness. Like in the show, Frank follows this arc of choosing how he wants to live and end his life. But Bill has two very different lives, miserable and alone, or full of joy and with purpose. Satisfied. I know I don't seem like the type. No, you do. There are moments in the show that, for me, feel pulled directly out of my own life in a way that I haven't seen in any media before. Like Frank gently touching Bill's beard, or holding hands on the couch with Frank's nervously comforting thumb movement, or having sex on a first date but explaining you're not a whore because there's a whole range of sexuality where sex is related to emotional and mental connection, not solely physical attraction. I've always been comfortable being gay. I had a boyfriend in high school, but that isn't true for so many guys. I dated a guy who was 29 at the time, and he had never had a partner, man or woman. Another guy I dated spent his 20s engaged to a woman. Last summer, I went on a few dates with a guy who's nearing 40, who has never introduced a partner to his family or friends, and still isn't out. Bill's story feels like people that I know. I think this episode is breaking into popular culture the way Brokeback Mountain did because it breaks the mold of the social stereotypes of gay men and gay relationships by simply being a relationship. And Bill and Frank never saw Brokeback Mountain because it never existed in the show universe. It came out in 2005, 2 years after Outbreak Day. Bill and Frank's relationship is a universal love story. It's what we've been trying to say for decades. Love is love. And let me love the way I want to. And this is why representation matters. The gaming community has a loud, vocal minority that is opposed to representation that doesn't look like straight, cisgendered white men or sexualized, objectified, cisgendered women. They claim that the mere act of other people who live in this world being represented in media is political, while their request to erase us from all media is somehow not. The contradiction is intentional to keep you arguing. Their goal is to have power over other people, not an internally consistent system. When The Last of Us, the game, came out in 2013, Bill's story was there, but it wasn't as in your face as in the show. The Last of Us dives very deep into the lives of LGBTQ plus people through the rest of Part 1, as seen in Ellie's Left Behind episode, and in Part 2, which is likely going to be several seasons of TV. Neil Druckmann, the creator, has stood by this and doubled down on this representation despite massive hate and vitriol directed at him online. His advocacy matters. Craig Mazin's commitment to showing what a middle-aged gay relationship looks like matters. Casting gay actors matters. Referencing historical gay works matters. And if you listen to the Behind the Episode podcast, you'll learn the great lengths they went to get this right, and it shows. Long, Long Time is the most emotionally impactful piece of television I have ever watched. It has changed me, and it has helped me feel seen in a way only A Little Life had before it. A Little Life is a tragically beautiful novel, but it is as masochistic to the reader as The Last of Us is to the player. So proceed with every possible trigger warning and bring your crying snacks. What's been striking to me in the days since the episode aired is how it has spread faster than a cordyceps infection. My straight friends are watching it. My straight friends have told me they are crying, and we're all talking about crying. We are all crying together about a gay love story. It is a beautiful love story in a world that is sorely lacking in love. I started this by discussing how gay men are stereotyped and othered to help straight people make sense of something they can't understand. My belief is that this episode has done a substantial amount of good. Love me the way I want to be loved. That's something anyone can understand. And my hope is that this leads to a broader level of acceptance and increased empathy, which we really need after years of increasing division, violence, and hate. And this is why representation matters. Yes, for me to feel seen, but also for everybody else to see me. To know that I don't need to be who my mom or my society wants me to be. I need to be as I am. I am a whole human, and I am enough. One more fun thing, Never Let Me Down Again by Depeche Mode played on Joel's radio at the end of episode 1, and the playlists were Frank's idea. And if you read the lyrics, the level of cleverness in this production of this TV show is astounding. I love the detail they've put in. I love that this episode exists, and I can't thank Neil and Craig enough for putting this out into the world. And thank you to Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett for playing these characters so honestly and authentically. It was beautiful, and it changed me. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.